Welcome everyone to the San Francisco Dharma Collective, having Amma Thanasanti present a series on I don't know, trauma-informed Satipatthana. I really hope all those words came out correctly. Uh, Amma's been Amma's been teaching with us since the collective formed, and we're really happy to have her come and do this series again. I don't know if any of you are returning from joining us last year, but I'm super excited to do it again. And um, I don't know, I'll let Alma say any other things that go forward with the times we'll be together.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, Jason, for hosting. And thank you, San Francisco Dharma Collective, for welcoming me. I am very happy to be here tonight for a whole bunch of reasons. And I'm happy that I recognize some of the people who are here. I don't get to see many of your faces. So if you feel at ease turning your videos on, it just is a lovely thing to be able to see you a little bit more in real time. And I would love to know where you are calling in from. So if we can have you put in the chat where you're calling in from, that would be lovely. I'm here in Oakland, California, and would love to see that, where you're all calling in from. Has the chat been enabled?
Apologies all around. We've got the video. You can undo your video now. So yeah, please come on. Please come on if you are up for that.
Oh,
What is
lovely. Nice to see peoples. That makes me happy to see your
it?
faces.
And we do have this chat set so that it comes to the hosts, which is Jason and myself tonight. So I'm going to read them out loud. So
Great.
after the notes about not being able to turn on the video, we have John in Berkeley and Heidi S. in Portland, Oregon, and Brian from Maryland, and Jason in San Francisco, Tamira uh, from Hood River, Oregon, and Marianne from Portland, Oregon, Janice from Sacramento, uh, Brooklyn in Brooklyn, Brooklyn from San Francisco, uh, Erica in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Sean in Seattle, and uh, let's see if I can fix that thing. Hmm. That is uh, Jason. I'll work on the chat with you. Anybody who wants to participate, who didn't put their Sonia in Bethesda, Maryland. Um, and then if anybody else who wishes to, wants to put their location in, uh, I may or may not have already said that my name is Tia and I'm in San Francisco.
Awesome. In terms of access needs, I have a request that if you've got your video on and you're moving around, if you can turn your video off, and if you could put your devices on a stable surface, that helps my brain not get exhausted. So thank you for that. So before I say much more about what we're going to do, let me just check in with you and ask you to put one more thing in the chat, which is, what is your hope for tonight and for this series? What are you hoping for? You're muted, Tia. Tia, you're muted.
And they're so good. I'll start over. Brian says, deepening my practice. John is hoping for enlightenment by 7:30 or bust. Marianne says, exhale. Erica says, a deeper understanding of mindfulness in my trauma recovery. Eugene says, brightness in learning. And Vivian says, focus in a chaotic time. Aya, and honestly, if I am mispronouncing your name, we will get to that momentarily, I hope. But Aya is in the Bay Area, and hi. And Sonia says, reaching some equanimity. And Heidi S says, maybe some answers. Sean says, relief via practice. And I am going to say, calming and settling.
Lovely. So part of the reason why I love this topic is a fewfold. One is that these suttas are phenomenally rich. They're incredibly deep. And if I have some capacity to impart the depth of these teachings, for me, that's a yay. But the other yay is that over these last many years, I have seen really the importance of a trauma-informed perspective to most everything. And if you come out tonight feeling more tools and more resources on how to use these classical teachings in a way that supports you feeling calm and settled and well and regulated, then that's a triple yay. So you get to be the ones to decide if that happens, but that's my hope. And I have my own history as to why these things are important to me. And I hope over the series, I'll have more of a chance to share some of that with you. Tonight, what I want to do is to give an overview of the sutta, the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, to talk about the significance of a trauma-informed perspective to these teachings, particularly at this political moment in time, and then to go into more detail of trauma-informed ways of practicing with these four foundations of mindfulness, and then go into more details specifically of the mindfulness of the body, the first foundation, mindfulness of the body. So this particular sutta, the Satipatthana Sutta, which translates as the Four Foundations of Mindfulness Sutta, is comprehensive. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that if we met every single week for a year, we would still have plenty to talk about it. So my encouragement or the invitation is not to try and hold on to the details because it can be dense, but to just let it wash over you. And I'm going to offer you a PDF of the sutta itself. So if that is of interest to you, you can go back and read Bhikkhu Bodhi's and Venerable Nyanamoli's translation of the sutta into English. And then there'll be a recording of this, and so that will also be available to you. And so what I'm also wanting to do, because several of you have mentioned in the check-in that what you want is calm or to feel more soothed or to just take a moment, is to really prioritize your own well-being during this class. And so what that means is that if you're starting to feel anxious or agitated and sitting isn't working for you, then to very quietly stand up. And if standing is not working for you, then to just do some walking as you're listening to what we're talking about. If you are walking in the view of your camera, if you can turn the camera off, that would be helpful. And so So that what I'm wanting is that as we move forward in this class, that every part of it feels helpful. And you are attentive to what is and is not helpful. The guided meditation will be about 20 minutes long. And then after that, I'm going to give a talk. There'll be a time for questions and comments after the talk. So if you have any questions that arise while I'm talking, if you can make a note of them and bring them to the question and comment or the Q&C time after the talk, that will help me. Chats, I think, have been disabled so that you can't send them to me. They can only go to Tia and Jason, our completely awesome Zoom hosts. So let's shift gears for meditation. What I'd like to invite you to do, let me just set my timer. Hang on one moment so that I can track the timing here. Oops, I set it for an hour and 20 minutes. That's going to be a little bit awkward. 20 minutes is about right. So what I'd like to invite you to do to begin with, before you close your eyes, is just look around the room. And notice what's in your room. And look behind your shoulder. And look behind your other shoulder. Now, as you're looking, I'd like you to notice the absence of anything that's dangerous or scary in your visual field. And as you notice the absence of danger, notice what happens to your nervous system, to your sense of calmness or ease. And now what I'd like you to do is to just pay a little bit of attention to your body and your posture, move around so that you're seated in a way where it feels like you can be here for a few minutes. And then the invitation is to allow the top of your hips. So if you put your hands on your hips, you want your hips to tilt slightly in front of your sitting bones. And what that does is it puts a small arch in the small of your back. And that makes it so that it's more likely for you to sit upright with less efforting in your muscles. And so as you do that, just notice where your body is. Notice the shape you are in. Maybe if it's possible to take a little bit of a tuck in your chin so that it makes your neck elongate. And now as you're sitting here, I'd like to invite you to imagine, excuse me, place that feels very protective, comfortable, safe. It might be a special room or a cozy cafe or a place by a special bay in the ocean or by a special tree or a huge rock. Some place that is familiar to you and comforting for you, soothing for you, where you feel protected. And if there are several places, just allow them to wash through your imagination and allowing the different components of each place to touch you. And if there's one place, then let it settle and let it become vivid so that you really get a feeling for what it looks like, what it feels like, what your body responds to it, what the temperature is like, if there's any scent on the air or any taste on the air. and just how you feel there. And so as you allow this safe space to fill you and make it as vivid as it is available to you, just bring that sense of safety into your body, into your breathing, into your being. And notice what you notice as you do this. What becomes clear? What parts of your body can you feel more? Which parts of your body start to relax more? Does your breath change? Does your sense of calmness change, become more or less prominent? Do you notice places that you are holding that you weren't aware of before? And so you can know that this safe space image is something that you can bring to mind whenever it is supportive to you. During this class, outside of this class, at any point. Now I'd like to shift gears for a moment and just bring your attention to your body sitting here, knowing that it is available to you to stand whenever that feels helpful. But as we are sitting, so that those of you I can see are sitting, I'd just like to invite you to just notice your weight. Notice your weight and notice your shape. Your weight, your shape, your form, these are all part of the earth element. The earth element of our body. And the earth element in our body is an element that can help us feel more grounded. And so when we focus on that, our weight, our shape, the form, it can help us feel a little bit more grounded. You can also focus on the water element. You can notice the moisture in your eyes, in your mouth. You can notice if there's dryness on your skin or a little bit of moisture or perspiration on your skin. And the water element helps us feel a sense of coherence. Notice when you bring your attention to the water element in your body. If you notice any impact. Now turn your attention towards the temperature. I just had something to eat before we started meeting, and I could feel a digestion process happening. The digestion process happens because of heat. Notice if there's parts of your body that feel warm. The warmth that you feel is the fire element. If there's parts of your body that feel cool, it's the absence of the fire element. And so we can shift our focus from the fire element to the space that we occupy, the space around us, the space in our nostrils. And the space element balances the earth element, has a different quality to it. And now we're shifting attention to the air element. And just noticing breath coming in and going out with each in-breath and with each out-breath. Air has the quality of flow. Movement. And so if it feels okay for you, I invite you to put your hand on your heart and or your belly. And as you breathe, just notice the weight of your hand on your heart and on your belly. Notice the weight, the warmth, and the movement. So in this breath meditation, we are sensing the earth element, the weight, the warmth, which is the fire element, and the movement, which is the air element. And so there's no need to change your breath or force your breath or control your breath. There's an invitation to bring an open, loving, non-judgmental awareness to the breath as it's breathing you, and allowing the hands to reflect the breath by the movement that they make, the in-breath and the out-breath. And so we may notice that as we breathe and as we exhale, and as our exhale elongates, our system tends to settle and calm, and our attention tends to gather. And so we are able to use the breath to help settle and calm. And so there's no need to worry or to feel anxious or to even have an opinion when our attention wanders. We can just gently allow our attention to reconnect with the feeling of the hand on the heart or on the belly. The feelings of breathing in and breathing out. Knowing that wandering and distraction are natural under any circumstances, and they're more apt to happen the more we have undigested trauma or activation in our system. And so kindness is always welcome. Gentleness is welcome. And so is persistence, returning again and again to the feeling of the hand on the heart, the hand on the belly, and the experience of breathing in and breathing out. And so as you are here breathing, I would like you to just take note of how it feels to have your attention settled in your own experience of your body breathing. How much of it is inward. Now I'd like you to begin to sense that we're in a group together with others, and allow your attention to sense into the field that we're in, the group that we're in, without disconnecting from your own body experience. So we want to stay anchored where our attention is with our own experience, but not cut off from the group experience. But we can change the dial of how much inward and how much outward we want to be. And so I would recommend that for our time together, you spend most of your time, or your dial is tuned so that most of your energy is inward, feeling your own body experience. Now I'd like to invite you to very slowly open your eyes and look above the computer screen. And look around the room again. Notice if anything looks different. Notice if things look the same. And now, keeping that commitment to keep most of your attention in your own body experience, very softly and gently look at the screen. We've got a couple of faces that we can see. We see names and we see pictures. You want to turn your video on, this is a welcome time to do that. And just very gently notice who's here together with us. Staying with your own experience. Staying with your own connection to your body. And now to close this meditation, what I'd like to invite you to do, if you've got glasses like I do, to take them off and to rub your hands and to give yourself a face massage and rub over your head and over the back of your head and over your arms and down the sides of your torso to your hips and down your legs as far as you can reach. So thank you for that. So what I'd like to do now is go into an overview of the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, and then talk about why trauma-informed practices are so important, and then go into the mindfulness of the body, the first foundation of mindfulness. So trauma is an experience that is overwhelming. So it's less about the actual details about what happened and more about how we respond to what is happening. And this whole experience of being overwhelmed by experience can happen in different ways. There's different categories. There's the kind of trauma that happens developmentally, where the impact of adverse childhood events or a chronic lack of safety or protection, attunement, encouragement, helps our brains shift to compensate for that. That's the first category. The second one is situational, where we can have accidents, experience violence, where there's the impact of war or hate crimes or disasters or environmental events. This is the second one. It's situational. It's things that we've lived through ourselves. The third category is epigenetic. And these are the traumatic events that our ancestors lived through that has changed their DNA. And that imprint on the DNA gets passed on. And so we can see that with people who have experienced persecution, genocide. We can see that with Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ, Jewish, other religious groups that have been persecuted. That's the third, epigenetic. The fourth is systemic. When the oppression that ends up as traumatic events is built into community and legal systems that systematically marginalizes certain people. And then there is the fifth one, which is vicarious. And that's what happens when first responders are on the scene. That's what happens when we read the news. That's what happens when we are witnessing a friend who is in the middle of processing some kind of a trauma. It's vicarious, but our system can be impacted nonetheless. The sixth one is compound. And compound trauma is when we have more than one of these types of traumas happening at the same time. So when we look at this list or these categories, it can begin to give us a sense why people from all kinds of walks of life are dealing with unresolved trauma, and the impact that it's happening on our nervous systems. We're feeling agitated and anxious and unsettled a lot. So this sutta that I'm going to be speaking about, the Satipatthana Sutta, which in English means the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. The sutta is based on the Buddha giving a talk to a group of bhikkhus. And bhikkhu is the Pali word for monk. Pali is the language the Buddha spoke. This sutta, which is translated into English by Bhikkhu Bodhi, he says, or his reference is, that even though bhikkhu is related to a monk, it is meant to be for anybody who practices these teachings. So we need to make a little switch. When you hear me use the word bhikkhu, we need to have it translated to anybody who practices this. So I'm going to be moving back and forth between reading excerpts from the sutta, describing what it means, and giving trauma-informed practices to work with them. So this is what the sutta says. Bhikkhus, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbana, namely the four foundations of mindfulness. Nibbana is enlightenment. What are the four? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as a body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. So what the Buddha is saying is that if you practice these four foundations of mindfulness, it contains within them everything that you need in order to attain the realization of Nibbana, to be free from sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. It's a complete path for enlightenment. Because it has all of these teachings, because it is so rich, of all of the 10,000 different suttas, discourses that the Buddha gave, this is one of the ones that is the most regarded, highestly regarded sutta, because it contains a path that if we follow, can be very freeing. So that's the context. It's really significant. The four foundations the Buddha lays out is the first one is the body. The second one is feelings or feeling tones. The third one is the things that we think or the emotions that we have. And the fourth one is objects of Dhamma, or categories through which we can look at the things that we're experiencing. So the first instruction, the mindfulness of the body, the very first instruction, the Buddha says, here a bhikkhu, gone to the forest or the root of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, sets his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful he breathes in, and mindful he breathes out. So this sutta sets it up so that what we are doing is we're practicing alone, we're practicing in silence, we're closing our eyes, and we're focusing on what is happening. So let's move out of the sutta for a moment, and let's just enter into our present world reality. How many of us are feeling numb? How many of us are feeling frozen? How many of us are unable to sleep or focus or think clearly? How many of us are struggling just to do simple tasks? How many are experiencing emotions that are intense and are unmanageable? How many are feeling exhausted? How many are feeling shattered? How many are feeling overwhelmed? Okay, so, and what we need to realize, it's not personal. This is the designed effect of socially engineered trauma. So in addition to the list that I read earlier of the 6 different categories, we have a category of trauma that is being deliberately engineered and rolled out. So the meditation instruction, the first thing it says is go to a place by yourself, alone. Sit down, close your eyes, and focus inwards. And when we are feeling all these things, sometimes doing that exactly makes it worse. So what we need to understand is that we don't need to abandon meditation, but we absolutely need trauma-informed tools that help us understand how to use meditation specifically in times like this. So my aim is to go back and forth between the actual teachings and trauma-informed ways of working with them so that we tool up. We use these ancient wisdom practices and we use them in a way that are more reliably able to bring us to a place of calm and ease in this extraordinary political moment of socially engineered trauma. So what that means is that it requires more intuition for each of you, that we utilize things like safe space meditations and grounding techniques, that you become sensitive to your capacity and alert to when you start feeling anxious and not managing what's happening, to be able to understand that. And we're going to talk more about being sensitive to your capacity in our next class, what that means and how to look for it and what kind of signs there are. And so when you start feeling anxious, when you start feeling like what's happening is more than you can manage, rather than push through it, we find ways to soothe and comfort ourselves. If the hand on your heart and your belly was soothing, do that. If the safe space meditation was soothing, do that. If it's easier for you to stand than to sit, do that. If it's more comfortable for you to walk, than it is for you to stand, do that. We need to be radically attentive to what is our actual reality rather than try and fit in to an idea about how we think we should be based on things that we've heard. So when we come back to the classical teachings of the first foundation of mindfulness, it is very rich. It has 6 different meditations in it. The last meditation has 8 different parts to it. So this first foundation of mindfulness is huge. It's really big. So the Amma Thanasanti is the breath meditation, which we started a little tiny taste of, to feel the breath coming in and going out. And this is expanded and deepened, used to be able to see and track more things. That's the first instruction, is to work with the breath. The second instruction is to understand the 4 postures. So in mindfulness meditation, we often are talking about sitting, but the Buddha instructed us to be mindful of our sitting, our standing, our walking, and our lying down. 4 postures, not 1. The third instruction is to be aware of what is happening in our body as we are going through daily life, as we are moving our arms, as we're putting on our clothes, as we are eating, as we are going to the toilet, when we are walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, when we are waking up, when we're talking, when we're silent. So this one is really a comprehensive awareness about daily life. The next set of instructions is a detailed look about what actually is a body. What is it made up of? And to go through the body looking at all of the different parts so that we begin to be a little bit more sober about it and not so puffed up about it. And no matter how vain any of us can be, most of us are probably not going to get excited about how sexy our liver is. It's just a liver, and most livers are going to look like most other livers. So this part of the meditation is really about, what is it to have a body? But this part of the meditation is something that we need to be careful about, because it's easy to do this with the wrong attitude and end up with a sense of self-hatred, and that's not helpful. So what we want to do is, rather than look at it in terms of something that's going to increase our self-hatred, look at it as a way of helping us develop more equanimity. Then the next set of instructions is the elements, which we had a very brief taste of in the guided meditation. And when we look at the elements, it simplifies the complexity of our world into just earth, air, water, fire, and space. What we're experiencing can be broken down into that. And anytime we have a way of moving from complexity to simplicity, that is a huge help coming out of overwhelm. Then the whole last set of instructions, the last one has the 8 different components to it, is corpse meditation. And so in a classical meditation practice, there's ways of watching the decaying process of a human body, again, so that we get a real tangible sense of what our bodies are made of and what happens to them. Not so that we get grossed out or freaked out or that we live in terror, but so that we are committed to being present and alive and here and unconfused about what is what. So the first foundation is all about the body. The second foundation is a mindfulness of feeling tones. And I'm going to go into that more in the next class about we need to be sensitive to triggers in relationship to emotions. And we need to be able to titrate pleasant and unpleasant. And this is where we will learn more about being inside and outside of our window of tolerance and develop more ways of helping us come back into our window of tolerance when we're out of it. The third foundation is the foundation of mind. And this is where we need to look for the potential for being hypervigilant, where we need to examine what it's like to live in a faux window of tolerance and to develop trauma-informed practices that counterbalance racing thoughts, agitation, restlessness, and begin to start identifying the internal triggers and reactions, the internal narratives, and start finding ways to work with them. The fourth foundation of mindfulness are the categories of Dhamma that we are going to be looking at how we experience in terms of the impermanence of our thoughts, emotions, and experiences. And then looking at that through developing a sense of equanimity, which is very different from dissociation or numbness or being frozen. So part of our skill is to begin to differentiate between equanimity, which is a healthy quality, it's supportive for us, and numbness, disassociation, and freeze, which is a trauma activation. And that is not something that is supportive or conducive as a way of being. It's an adaptive strategy in order to cope with something that is overwhelming, but it's not helpful to stay in that. So when we are able to put these together, instead of using the meditation to bypass our experience, we use the meditation to open up to our experience. Instead of using meditation to ignore the numbness that we have, we use trauma-informed tools and techniques to help us feel more connected, more engaged, and more able to manage what is happening. The fourth foundation of mindfulness has many different factors to it. And then the end, the Buddha says, if anyone should develop these four foundations of mindfulness in such a way for 7 years, you can experience one of two fruits. Either they're completely enlightened, or if there's a trace of clinging left, they're a non-returner. And then it goes on to say, let alone a half month, and then let alone a week, and then alone just 7 days. One of these two fruits can be expected, either complete awakening here and now, or if there's a trace of clinging left, non-returner, which is the third stage of enlightenment. And so it is in reference to this that it was said, bhikkhus, this is the direct path for the purification of beings, for the surmounting of sorrow and limitation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the true way, for the realization of Nibbana, namely the four foundations of mindfulness. And when the Blessed One said that, the bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So what I'm hoping to be able to convey is that these four foundations of mindfulness is a comprehensive path that is designed specifically to lead to liberation. And as we bring appropriate tools to the unaddressed layers of trauma, our capacity to put these teachings into practice increases. So one of the things that I want to talk about is a program that I developed. It's called the Integrated Meditation Program. And part of the reason for developing that program is to address some of the impacts of attachment wounds and to develop a way to increase our neuroplasticity, to change some of the patterns that are present even after insight. So this sutta, the Buddha spoke these words 2,600 years ago. It's time-tested. And yet, even with life-changing insights, even with stages of enlightenment, it's possible to have trauma and attachment wounds that are not repaired. And so it's like, how is that possible? How is it possible that you can have experiences of enlightenment and still have trauma that doesn't clear out of your system? And so one of the ways that it's helpful to think about that is that these teachings are designed to support having the 7 factors of awakening develop and mature. And those 7 factors of awakening are the factors that are needed for insight. And they're the factors that are needed for awakening. But what we need for neuroplasticity to change what has trauma rooted in our systems and attachment wounds in our systems is slightly different than the 7 factors of awakening. And that is the reason why the integrated meditation program is effective, because it brings these different factors, these 5 factors, into a 3D field with community support to optimize them so we can experience lasting change. And then as we do that, as we experience that change inside of us, it gives us more of an ability to then release the other traumas that haven't released yet. So I want to pause here, open up your questions, and then see where we go from there. And for questions, you're welcome to raise your hand. You're welcome to raise your electronic hand, or you're welcome to put a question in the chat. Questions, comments, impact, all of that is welcome. Yes, Brian.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. That's good being here. I just want to acknowledge how much I really appreciated this talk, Alma, and everyone's presence here. I being on the East Coast, it's late and I need to leave, and I will see you all next week. Thank you. Thank you,
Brian. Thank you for joining us. It's really
Thank you.
good to have you here. Yeah.
Good night.
Good night. Yes, Jason.
Thank you very much. I don't think I've ever heard as cogent and clear kind of an outline of what I feel is a challenge with trauma for me. And I'm very interested in finding out just what you mentioned, which is that it's almost like no matter how much meditation one does, the trauma exists in a place that's it's almost as if it has a self-preservation. Like there's a reason why it wants to keep existing, and that is what boggles me. It's like I feel like with my trauma, it's nonverbal and early childhood, so I don't have access to it. And if I'm very interested to hear more about the integrated meditation program, um, because, and I'm wondering if, if you bring in qualities of cognitive behavioral and sort of what is it called, EMDR or something like that, where you tapping and the kinds of access tools. So I'm wondering about if you can just kind of outline the next phases of this.
So
I would
the
certainly appreciate it.
So the integrated meditation program is designed to support neuroplasticity and changing these fundamental patterns that got established pre-verbally. And so the way it works, it's actually quite simple and it's quite brilliant. And the simplicity is that the maladaptation happened because of an absence of 5 factors. Safety and protection is one, attunement, comfort and soothing is another, delight and encouragement. So the simplicity is that we front load those in abundance. We create a program where that's kind of like the ethos of how we are and how we roll and what we do. And then we've created a relational field where people support each other and encourage each other in these practices and with these qualities, so that you're not doing it alone, you're doing it with support, and you're doing it with encouragement. And so in addition to getting these qualities that haven't been there enough so that they become available, you're doing it with community support and in a way that is celebrating the insights and the shifts that happen. So the 5 qualities and the 3 pillars, the 3 pillars is collaboration, mentalization, and ideal parent figure imagery or ideal support. So we layer these things of collaboration, working with the meditation, and bringing imaginary support that's ideal to help us. So every Wednesday at 5:30 Pacific time, I'm having a drop-in experience to talk more about the integrated meditation program. And you can ask your questions or we can talk more. I'm going to talk more about it. I am delighted about this program for a few reasons. I have my own set of traumas, and I've had my own set of traumas, both because of the stuff that I've gone through personally, my epigenetically, but also the things that I lived in the monastery. And so part of the reason why this is so satisfying for me is because it feels like I can take the challenges and the traumas that I've lived through and turn it into compost that helps people metabolize and transform the stuff into things that is actually life affirming and allows us to thrive. And that is deeply satisfying. Tia, can you pop that link in the chat? So there's a link that Tia is going to pop in that will take you to the registration of the drop-in group for tomorrow. But the integrated meditation page has got blog posts and videos and information about the last cohort and all kinds of things. So if you're interested, you can check it out. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate your question. Yes, please. Erica.
Okay. You talked a little bit about some of the traumas that come about generationally that, like people who survived the Holocaust, how that could possibly get transferred down to their granddaughter, something like that. Like how do we go about disconnecting from that? Is that something that we can disconnect from? Because I would very much like to disconnect from that right now.
It's a really important question. And it's a really, really important question. I don't have an easy answer for it. But what I do know is that I just have had a big, huge health journey. And part of my health journey was to use the challenge of the health journey in order to clear out some of my epigenetic trauma. And so I did ceremony with it and I prayed for it and I was asking for support. And it was my intention to use the challenge of my health journey to help me shift. And the result is that I feel much lighter and much clearer. So it has helped. It has done. I feel much less under the weight of this generational trauma that I've been carrying. So the answer is yes, it can help. It can happen. And with different people, what they need are different things. And so that would take more of like talking one-on-one and finding out what the situation is and having more of a sense of the kind of tools that you have access to and what resonates for you. For me, nature and ceremony are very powerful. And so that's what I have used a lot. And I feel for you because it's like I know so intimately that weight. And there's just such a longing to have it shift. And especially in our contemporary time, like right now, anything that can help us become clear so that we're not carrying the charge of our ancestors is going to help us respond to the moment. Yeah. Yes. Comments, impact that you had from listening to the share, what you'd like to convey. Marianne.
Thank you, Amma. I don't really have a question so much as I just want to thank you for the orienting practice. When we started the meditation, and when we ended the meditation period, I've done orienting before, looking around, but it was actually the looking behind each shoulder. And then you said something like, notice that you're safe where you are. And I'm in my home and I feel safe here, but I don't think I had actually like connected with that. Like I realized how much maybe I am holding. And so it was just felt really important to acknowledge, oh yeah, this is a safe space. It was very moving. Just that really simple practice. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
So Marianne, what you're bringing up is really important. And one of the reasons why it's so important is because the premise of meditation is that people experience a certain basic level of safety in themselves. That's the premise. And when we are dealing with activation or trauma, when we're out of our window of tolerance, we cannot assume that we have that. And so that very basic thing about whether you feel safe enough to close your eyes, we cannot assume. We have to actually make steps to assure that we feel okay to close our eyes. And that is like a really good example of the difference between classical meditation instructions and trauma-informed instructions. The trauma-informed instructions do not tell you to sit down, close your eyes, be still, and focus on what's going on. They will help you get there, but they don't assume that you're there at the beginning. Anybody else want to speak? Yes, Tia.
One thing that I'm trying to notice more in general and really noticed in the meditation and even throughout the talk is the moments when I am physically relaxing and trying to be like, look, it's happening, and it feels in a way, I feel like uh, when I'm absorbing the information about how to titrate a thing, it's always like, this is a really hard thing, just do it a little bit and come back, right? And this kind of feels like titrating the good parts, like, oh yeah, notice that part and see if we can have, then access to doing it more. So it was a kind of a broadening of my idea of what titration can be like it in an experience. And yeah, thank you.
Yes, and one of the things that you're bringing up, Tia, which is a really, really important point, is that the more our system gets activated, the more it's really hard for us to do simple things like relax or focus or experience joy or ease or safety. Those are less available. So titration is the principle of, instead of just focusing all at once, you bring a little bit. So if you've got the titration, the concept is a chemistry concept. To titrate acid, you bring something that's basic, and you bring as much basic compound as you need to make the acid neutral, to neutralize something. It's a chemistry concept. But in meditation, what it's talking about is, instead of going in and like jumping in or diving in or focusing all at once, is that you go back and forth from something that's difficult to something that's neutral or pleasant, to be able to balance it so that it's better, you're able better to manage it. But what Tia was saying, which is really important, is that the opposite is true, that we need to lift up and to celebrate when we are relaxing, when we do feel safe, when we do have a moment of being able to collect our attention, when we're not feeling scattered or distracted, and to really see what that feels like, to let our nervous system know, oh, it's okay. We actually can register that we feel safe. Safety feels like this. And so rather than assume that we're safe, to really celebrate and be curious and look at what safety feels like, even if it's just a window, like a moment of like, oh, I looked behind my shoulders and there's nothing back there that's scaring me. And that I can trust that. And, part of what we're dealing with is because, what's scaring us now is not in our visual field, it's out there somewhere. But it's like it doesn't ever end, and so there's not a sense that we can come into a place that's safety, that's free from that. So we have to be particularly skilled, because our system, the whole thing is designed to keep us activated and agitated and out of our window of tolerance, so that our nervous systems go offline. So in order to counter that, we need to look for moments of safety, and like a life raft, hang on to them, celebrate them, lift them up, expand them, make them bigger, so that we can let our nervous system settle for moments at a time and get the feeling of what that feels like. Jason.
I don't want to bogart the chat, but I am interested in sharing that when you said look around the first time, I saw my room and I saw everything and I just took note of it, that it felt safe. But when at the end of the meditation, when I looked at the things around me, they felt comforting. It was like a shift. The comfort of the space was like magnified, or I just had that feeling of like just joyous, like the stuff had a quality that was new, and I really appreciated that.
So Jason, when you feel that quality of new, when it feels comforting, what do you notice? What happens inside?
Joy.
Joy. And where do you experience the joy?
Just a very kind of in my core chest, my chest area. I think it's just very it's sort of all over actually, but it's just this, it's almost like a giggle.
So if you let yourself have that giggle and just be with that giggle without trying to do anything, just be with that giggle, let that giggle be there. What happens?
It melts some of the frozen parts.
That's right. That's right. So joy is one of the things that is really important. Finding joy, having joy, being joy, making joy. It's really important. It does all kinds of good things, and there's very little bad things that it does. And it's not very available to us when we're feeling frozen or numb or freaked out. So, thank you, Jason. Vivian.
First of all, really happy to see you, Amma. We met years ago. Just really happy to hear your voice. I'm really glad to see the different trauma types, because lately I just feel very unsettled. I don't know why. I just recently traveled domestically. I brought my passport with me because I didn't want to have an accidental trip outside of this country. And it just kind of, it bothers me that I even have to think about it. And of course, I also flew Delta, and in the middle of my trip, the news came out and I tried really hard to avoid the news. Anyway, just trying to deal with my various trauma, and I feel like just to understand that and then understand how my response to various trauma has an impact on people around me. So thank you.
Vivian, remind me where we first met.
Mississippi.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the retreat there.
Yeah, that was many years ago. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. So first of all, Vivian, I just have to normalize that what you're experiencing, you are not alone in. You know, more people I know than I don't know are feeling unsettled and distressed. And it's not something that any of us can fix. So it's completely true that the trauma load that we each carry is going to feed into the unsettledness that we have, but it's not the only thing. You know, we're living in a moment that is deeply unsettling. It's deeply unsettling. So each of us is going to have to find our way through this. But part of the reason why I have the passion that I have about this kind of work is because it's my experience and it's my belief, both, that the more that we're able to clear some of our own developmental wounding out of our system, the more it positions us in a place of resilience. And the more resilience we have fundamentally in terms of the core of our own nature, that gives us the capacity to deal with these other traumas that we've gone through or that we have or that we carry. so that it ends up making it so that even though any trauma that we carry is traumatic, it gives us more capacity to resolve it, to clear it out of our system. Now, some of the things that some of us have been dealing with are systemic. And I remember hearing Resmond Menachman saying, like, for example, with racism, it takes 7 generations to clear the systemic trauma load of that out of people's systems. 7 generations. That's a long time to wait. But if I was at a group on the East Coast, and there was a Black woman who raised her hand, and she was speaking about the fact that she never experienced safety anywhere, ever. And I was just in the beginning of understanding attachment work. And I came out of that with this big, huge aha. And I wasn't able to talk about it with her because the class ended. But if she was looking through the lens of racial and systemic oppression as the reason why she had no sense of internal safety, and what was also happening is that there was attachment wounding, so that her internal safety was not present because of the strategies that were available to her in her formative years. Attachment work is something that is possible to do and to see dramatic shifts in a period of a few years, where you can experience internal safety from not having had any. And so in that situation, it was speculative because I didn't know the circumstance or the situation. I didn't have any way of assessing it. But if people are looking through the lens of something that's systemic, and you don't have much power to control that, when in fact it's a mixture of what's systemic and what's developmental. Developmental trauma we can shift, and it doesn't take 7 generations. We can do it in a period of a few years. To be able to experience an internal sense of safety from not having ever experienced it is a huge shift. And with that shift comes the ability to have more capacity to understand how to look at some of these things that we can't control in ways where there's equanimity as opposed to just defeat. And that's part of the reason why I feel so passionate about all of this. It feels like it has a lot of scope. Vivian, when I say all of this, what happens for you?
It feels really good just to be able to hear about it and talk about it. Because honestly, before I joined the session, I didn't even think about, am I responding to trauma or anything? I saw your name. That's why I signed up.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. What I'd like to do in closing is invite you to chat what you're leaving this session with. What are you leaving this session with? And if you put it to everyone, I'll be able to see them and read them out.
I would have needed to have changed the chat settings, which I'll do next time so that we can all share together at the end.
Okay.
So I'm going to read them today. And Aya says calm, and Janice says gratitude for your teachings. John, meditation comes with a presumption that we feel safe in our own bodies. And Jason says, Jason just went to everybody. But it says, I'm feeling hopeful about finding joy and will come to drop-ins on Wednesdays. Erica is feeling validated and seen. So grateful for this experience and connection. Marianne, how to start from a place of safety.
Right. Wonderful. Well, I certainly appreciate your time and your attention and your interest. And this is the beginning. We have next Tuesday, and then we have a 3-hour class on the 8th of March. Next class, we'll be looking at feelings, the window of tolerance, and hindrances. Following then, we'll be looking at the Four Noble Truths, the factors of awakening, and then Four Noble Truths on Saturday. And so it's my intention to continue to move back and forth between the classical teachings of the actual sutta and how to bring a trauma-informed perspective of them. And I'm going to continue talking about the integrated meditation program because I think it fits nicely into what we're doing here in terms of giving more support and tools and an opportunity to shift some of these things that feel like they don't shift. And they do when they're with the right support. So again, Janice.
Oh, hi, thank you. I wanted to say, like Vivian, I saw you at the Sacramento Buddhist meditation group for a day long several years ago.
Yes.
And that's why I signed up too. I'm like, oh my God. And I didn't know, I mean, it's just been a long time, but thank you so much for these teachings. But I do have a question about the integrated class. How is that, how does that differ from these 3 classes? Or have you already talked about that?
No, these 3 classes, it's a class on the trauma-informed Satipatthana. And that is a 6-month program that's got its own thing. It's got big groups and small groups and one-on-ones with me, and it's its own curriculum. And the whole design of it is to set people up so that they have the tools and the leverage to shift the stuff that doesn't shift with just meditation.
Okay. And you'll talk more, and we need to come to the drop-in to find out more about it.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Got it.
Tia has something here. Yeah.
I do. I want to highlight one other there's two differences. One of them is inconsequential and one of them is large. The one that is smaller between this series and the integrated meditation program is that the San Francisco Dharma Collective with Amma is doing this series, and Awakening Truth, which is Amma's nonprofit, is doing the integrated meditation program. So it's not through the collective, and that's the small one. But the larger one is that it is it has a sliding scale, but it is a payment required kind of program. It's also longer and more comprehensive, whereas we are everyone's welcome to attend, and we're asking for donations. So kind of fee for service model is involved. There's also if you're interested, there's kind of an application process to go through, which you'll learn all about in the other thing. But it's a more involved, long-term half-year program. But it's also not through the collective.
And it sounds very in-depth.
People are loving it.
And the other thing is about this is that it's that program is like the portal into a community. And the community is a trauma-informed Dharma community that is absolutely interested and committed to making it safe for people to practice meditation as well as do their trauma work. Right. And so the community that forms from people going through this program is committed to taking the tools and the technologies and the culture that we're developing into their meditation practice.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, awesome. I'll see you next week.